you don't mind, can I interrupt you and go to the phones right now? Hello, caller?
Hello?
Hello?
I'm looking for the legendary Wink.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Jackie.
Okay, Jackie the Jokeman Martling joining us live on the phone. Thank you so much for participating in this.
Oh, God, I think I got the wrong number.
Now, thank you, Jackie. We were sitting here, we were discussing the world in progress, but how did your golf game go?
Speaking of the world in progress, I think I set the world back about 14 days today with my golf. You know, if I was playing for poop, I wouldn't have got a smell.
Well, 14 days makes 2 weeks. Okay, but just like that joke was 2 weeks.
Oh, man.
I got a week back.
How long?
Ask me when I got it.
When'd you get it?
I get it about a week back.
So, Jackie, I never talk to a comic who doesn't remember the first time seeing Wid perform. Do you remember the first time you saw Wid perform?
How could I forget? I saw it again last night.
What, do you got eyes in the back of your head?
Jesus, you know what? I probably don't remember because in those days, number one, there was this thing that I used to fool around with alcohol.
Right.
And
I was right there with you.
Where were we? It must have been a Scarpati gig. You know, I can kind of remember. I just remember it was an absolute free-for-all. But you got to remember, I had been through the Lenny Schultz days, too. So, you know, it was... Wid was faster and funnier, but it was that insane thing. You know, like in one minute you're laughing, and the next minute you're thinking, "Am I really going to walk on stage and walk among all that crap?" You know,
Boy, they
two
all
Jews go into a bar as I trip over a teddy bear.
There's one of the Bernstein Bears.
I loved him right away. Right away, I liked the old Wid, sir, and we've been very dear friends probably since the day we met. I'm thinking, unless he harbored secret resentments because my penis was so much bigger. I'm not sure. You know.
They all taste the same, Jack.
You know, it's so weird because the first time I saw Wid, the night I met him, I actually thought he was a pedophile because we were at the Comedy Cabaret and I went into the men's room and I was standing at the urinal and Wid was next to me and I looked over and looked down and I said, "Look at that, a grown man holding a little boy's penis."
Oh, it is him. It is him.
You remember that, Jack? That's amazing. You have a great memory. All right, Jack.
Oh God, you know, and thank God that at that point I had good eyesight too. I wouldn't have seen anything. There would have been no story. We had some very, very, very wild, fun, crazy days. You know, I was fooling around in Philadelphia for years before I ever got near Howard Stern. You know.
Yeah, you were right there, and you know. That was Jackie. We still admire you, but to learn about what a cool life you had in your book, okay? And
did you enjoy it?
All right, it was very fun to read that. It was somebody who didn't have too many psychological problems as a child, and who actually graduated with a degree from the University of Michigan, right?
No, number one, you're wrong you said two things and you were wrong twice. Number one, it was the University of Michigan. I've been correcting people forever, but I always say to myself, why correct them? Because University of Michigan and Michigan State, that's like you just handed me 600 SAT points. You know? And also, the reason I didn't have any problems as a child is because I chose not to write about that crap in the book. You know, I mean, my family was, you know, pretty weird and pretty crazy. Like, you know, it was absolutely normal, except when it wasn't. You know what I mean? It was pretty beyond the pale, and you don't know it. It's like there's a fish know it's in water. You know, you don't know your family's crazy. You don't know you come from an old jalopy of a house and your friends don't, and all of a sudden one day you notice, and it's like, holy Christ, you know, I'm thinking, what do I think when I walk into their houses? But forget that. what do they think when they walk into my house? You know, it's like two different experiences. But you don't see that when you're a kid. You know, you just roll with everything, you know.
Jackie, my two favorite parts of the book were, one is, I noticed with you, with Rich Scheidner, other comedian biographies I read, you guys have very photographic memories. And my favorite part of the book was every single time you mentioned Gary Dell'Abate's name in the book, you had like Tata Toothy, Mama Monkey.
Know, and I did that thinking it was so fun and so goofy. And then I got a bunch of emails from different people saying, wow, I never knew you hated Gary so much. And I'm like, how could they possibly ascertain hate or dislike? And then I realized, and Gary said to me, he said, yeah, you never, for all the goofing you did on me, which is fine, you never came out and said, well, Gary did a really good job and he's a really hard worker, which he is and which he was. But I wrote 2 books. I had 600 pages. And then I had to go in and do Sophie's Choice, and I had to choose 300 out of the 600 pages. So probably in the other half, there were places where I sung Gary's praises, and they just didn't make it into the book, but that was not by design. You know, I have no bone to pick with him, and he's a nice guy, and we always have had each other's backs and everything. So I actually felt bad that he thought I didn't give him his due, and had I reread it before I had it printed, thinking about that, I probably would have added that in. But all that Tata Toofy and Gaga Gummy, I just thought that once somebody started laughing at that it would be really funny every time, you know? And I'm glad you pointed that out.
Well, Jackie, you can always blame it on the Ambien. Okay? Because, you know, it was a sleeper hit. My favorite part.
I will never get over that, you know. Number one, if she takes a drug, how's it ever going to get into her system fighting through all that food? Jesus, you know. That's a big girl. Her pussy's so big at the bottom they speak Chinese.
Oh, my. I paid a fortune for that cookie. All right.
So, Jackie, Gary was offended by some of the things you said in your book. Was there ever anything?
No, he wasn't offended. He just felt bad that I never took the trouble to say, by the way, for all the goofing, Gary works very, very hard and does a great job. And that just wasn't in there. He wasn't offended by anything. You know, I mean, we all been taking shots at each other forever.
Right, I got you.
I didn't think it was an offensive book at all.
What I'm curious about, Jackie, is there anything that they said to you, anybody on the staff, on the air during the Stern Show, that you took offense to, where you said, oh, man, they went too far?
Yeah, just about every time they open their mouth.
Jackie, a couple of years ago, when Gary put his book out, I was at a book signing in the area, and it's a serious book. Like, he didn't really talk about the Stern Show, about his life. He had a brother that passed away. It was just very, very serious, and it's an interesting book, but people were in line dressed as Gary from the 80s with these giant index card horse teeth and afros to torture him.
And then John Oates was driving down the street thinking, this is the greatest day of my life. Everybody's here to pay tribute to my genius.
You know, it never, listen, I just did a golf outing, and the guy that asked me to play golf with him, who treated me to the outing, is on the board of this charity. Nicest guy in the world. He was out of his mind thrilled that I came to do the outing. And after he had 2 beers, he spent the next 17 holes going, hey, how you doing? Hey! I turned to him. I said, you have no idea how old that gets. He said, no, it's really funny. I said, no, it is not really funny. It's a pain in my ass.
Oh, my God.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for doing the outing. Like, Jesus Christ, you know. Like, if you went to the crucifixion, would you stand there and go, Jesus, I bet your hands hurt. So, you know, who knows? But you know what? It's also, it paid for my house. So go ahead. Say anything you want.
I guess it's your cross to bear. Okay. But
Oh, boy.
honestly,
You know, Philadelphia was always so much damn fun. And I couldn't believe we got to go back there. Listen, I don't know if you know this story. I bet you I've told this story to you, Wid. But maybe not. When I first got on the show, I went in there to sit in, and they said, "You're a good guy. Come back next week." So I was coming back once a week for 3 years. So, but when I first was invited back, I listened to the show when I could because I wanted to see what I was getting into because I had no idea what it was. When I sent my albums to him and he called me up, I had never heard 1 minute of his show. So I went in and sat in on the air, completely cold, no idea what was going to go on. And so this is kind of interesting. So I'd listen because I gave him some stuff for his black helicopter reporter, and then we came up with the Stump the Comedians and stuff. And so I actually would be listening. And I can remember this as clear as day. And I've never heard it on the air. I've never heard a tape of it. And they have I think they have tape of Howard being born. You know what I mean? They got everything. And I can remember I was standing on this little half a ladder in the kitchen of the house we were renting. And that's why, another reason I remember, I was fixing something, and I never fixed anything in the last 40 years. So I was probably changing a light bulb or something. And I'm listening to the show. And all of a sudden, Gary comes in and says, "Hey, Howard, there's a girl here. She says she wants to take off all her clothes." And he's like, "Oh, bring her in, And you know what? I don't even know if it was Gary. It might have been I think it was early enough on. It might have been Boy Lee.
It sounded like Jackie
Mason.
Mason.
Before there was Baba Booey. Before there was Gary Dell'Abate. I think it might have been Lee. And they said, "Oh, hello." And this girl, they described her. She walked in wearing just a fur coat. Okay. And Howard said, "Oh, it's nice to meet you. Just have a seat. Who are you?" I swear to God, Wid, she said, "My name is Maria. I work at the door at the Comedy Factory outlet in Philadelphia, and my favorite comedian is Jackie Martling."
We know who she is.
I mean, I couldn't imagine what must have went through his head. We never talked about it, never discussed it. Nobody ever said it's true, it's not true. But there's no reason I would ever make that up. She said that. Now, do you know who we're talking about?
She married
Stu Bykowski.
She married Stu
Bykowski. What was her name? Maria? It was some Italian name.
Maria, and she wasn't bad looking, but she had crazy eyes.
She was adorable, and I guess she just had on a fur coat and just dropped the fur coat, and I guess she was standing there, naked as hell. And thank God, in those days there was still pubic hair, which just made it such a party.
Stu Bykowski, by the way, is a Philadelphia, Pennsylvania columnist.
A columnist for how many years now? He must.
Now, is he still doing that? Is he still around? I don't think they're still together.
No, they're not still together. And he talks about her in a disparaging way as his ex, and.
That stinks. She couldn't have been nicer.
But who knew a gal who would show up at a radio station wearing nothing under her mink coat or whatever we just heard was unstable?
I loved her, but I never went near her. I don't know anybody that ever fiddled her. I mean, I'm sure there was comedians that fiddled around.
How many? I wonder. All right.
Did you fool around with? Did you fool around her with?
A lot of people did.
Is that true?
And that's true, okay? And
I'm sure she's a very nice woman.
I'm sure. No, I'm not saying.
So she liked everybody but me.
That's what I heard.
She was with everybody but me.
Oh no! But, I've just been.
That's that old definition, the difference between a bitch and a slut.
My! I've just been.
A bitch is a girl who bangs everybody, and a slut's a girl who bangs everybody but you.
Jackie, I've just been told her surname, and for this reason, I have to say I'm sure she's a very nice woman of good standing.
Okay. Oh no, she's a little tiny girl. I would never say this about her.
Yes, she was very precocious, and she was very admirable too. But she went over to the there were two fractions back then.
Wow.
There were the Comedy Factory outlet, and there was the Comedy Works, and they were right around the corner from each other. And there was bad blood between them, and of course there were competition. So you couldn't play
between Clay Heery and Steve Young. It was like
Clay Heery and Steve Young,
right?
and she was over at that side a lot of times. But she would. That was kind of funny. That was during the boom, and there was 2 comedy clubs like right around the corner from each other, and they would, they would badmouth each other, and they would, you couldn't play one if the other, and you had to choose a side. And
right, and the Comedy Factory Outlet had DeBella, who ruled the roost in Philadelphia.
He was the ruler of the roost back then, and he is still on the air here. Do you do his,
Jackie, before
I called into him once or twice, and then he stopped letting me on the air, which was so stupid. I knew him and disliked him from the 70s. He was one of the DJs. No, I didn't dislike him, but he was one of the DJs at WLIR here on Long Island, and I worked in a recording studio, and the DJs, John DeBella, Dennis Elsis, Meg Griffin, they used to come into the studio to record commercials. They'd make money recording commercials for the sponsors, So I knew all those characters. And then all of a sudden he's in Philadelphia, and here he is, and I'm on the air with him. Me and Sullivan and Nelson are going on doing his radio show. And then all of a sudden, 5 or 6 years later, we're at war with him from the Stern Show. I'm like, this guy's had, 3 major chapters of my life, But it was great fun. Philly was great. Andy Scott.
Oh, yeah, they had that big thing against him, right? I forgot about that.
They held a funeral for John DeBella.
That's what happened.
This is all detailed in Jackie's book.
Oh, yeah, because that was when me and Howard were in the bathtub with Jessica Hahn, and I wound up getting in trouble with my wife. That's 2 chapters. That's 2 chapters in my book. There's only 2 There's only 2 things that happened that are 2 chapters, and one was my initial meeting and going on the Stern Show, and the other one was the funeral in Philadelphia and ensuing madness, which was just great.
And the book is called Kneel Before Howard.
No. It's called
Blow Me. No, it's the Jokeman, Bow to Stern, and you can get it on Amazon.
Bow to Stern.
At JackieTheJokeman.com. The Amazon page comes right up. JackieTheJokeman.com, and it's on Kindle, and it's on audiobook, which was, you would think it would be the biggest drag in the world to read a book. And then I go in to do it, and I'm like, Jackie, you're reading your own book. It's about you. These guys are doing the work. They're producing and taping and editing. It was 2 or 3 of the greatest days I ever had. I really enjoyed it because they were big fans, and they were anxious to hear the stories. And it was, and there's no pressure because you have to read exactly what's on the page. So there's no pressure to ad lib or be funny or whatever. So I did that, and they said it was one of the best author-read biographies that they've had in the 25 years they were there. And Artie read the forward. The forward that he wrote, he read it.
Cool.
So it's a fun thing. And a guy came over today and bought 25 copies. He's a really wealthy hedge fund guy, and every once in a while they got to give some kind of tchotchke to their people whose money they're soaking up, So he bought 25 copies, and I autographed it to each of his friends, and he's just going to give them to them, as a thank you for your business type thing, which was like, wow, that's great. So I made a few shekels, and he made gazillion times more shekels, and that's America.
That's wonderful.
That's America.
He mentioned Artie in one of Artie's biographies. They have the Reverend Bob Levy reading one of the chapters. Oh, my God.
The audiobook?
Yeah, Bob's a friend of mine, but Artie did this.
Now, do you know the story of him?
Oh, I forgot. When do you hear this? You can tell it.
When I started on the Stern Show, I was there on Tuesdays. So I said to Mark from Rascals, why don't you have an open mic night on Tuesdays? I can announce it on the Howard Stern Show because I got nothing else to promote. If I promote, then you could pay me. So I think Mark was going to give me $300 a week, even if people didn't show up because it was such an incredibly invaluable ad, for Howard to say a couple times during the show. And tonight, Jackie will be at, Rascals Comedy Club for open mic night. So I started doing that, and I did it, I don't know, for a year or something like that. But, I'd have between 6, 8, 10, 12 different people every week audition, but of course some of them came back. And there was one guy that got up, and he was so disgusting. And the next week, it was even more disgusting. So the third week, I said, here he is, Reverend Bob Levy. And the name stuck. 20 years later, somebody said, oh, I'm working with Reverend Bob Levy. I said, you're not going to tell me that nickname stuck. Isn't that a great story? That's a true story.
I didn't think he was ordained.
But so much fun, man.
Should have been Rabbi
Hey,
Levy.
Jackie, my brother and I were listening to your music album on the way up to the Poconos, and it was quite good. And you know, I did not know that you had it so together on you know, as being a quasi rock star as you do, man. That was
well, I spent the 70s playing in a band and writing songs. And I quit music when I was 31, and I always steal Rodney's joke. When I was 31, I quit music, and to give you an idea how well I was doing, I was the only one who knew I quit. But I wrote all these songs, and you know, we played original songs and told dirty jokes on stage for the entire 70s. And we were so good and so funny, and people loved us, but we just never got anywhere because there was nothing to do. You know, there was no way to videotape yourself. You know, it's so funny. Just like the computer, in 1978 and 79, there was no such thing as a VCR, and within 2 years, everybody had a VCR. You know, just like there was no such thing as a cell phone, and 2 years later, everybody had a cell phone. You know what I mean? So there's no videotape of that band. Nobody, just the people that came just loved it. But then we broke up. But in that 10 years or 8 years, I wrote a bunch of songs that were good. Like we played songs that made the people go crazy that came to our shows. And then we made that hit single, which was the Pot song, which once Howard got a hold of that, he went nuts. And then years later, it's like, I don't know, 2005, I was driving along in my car, going back to the city, and I had an old friend, this really beautiful girl, lives in Las Vegas, and I used to call her late at night because it's 3 hours earlier there. So I'm driving along on the expressway. I'll never forget, I'm right in front of Leaf Rack City. I just said, you know, I'm just getting ready to get stoned, and I call JC, and I get her machine, and I'm like, oh man, I said, oh Jay, this is such a drag, you know, I got another 45 minutes before I get to my apartment, and we could have chatted and caught up. What do you do? Well, at any rate, I'm smoking pot, and I got my dick out, and I'm thinking about you.
And that's the name of the song.
And I hung up. And then I said to myself, I'm smoking pot. I got my dick out. And I'm thinking about you. Next thing I know, I'm singing it. Next thing I know, I'm recording it into a micro-cassette recorder. The people on either side of me in the expressway are looking at me like I'm out of my mind because I'm recording and smoking out of my pipe and laughing and having a great old time. And then 20 minutes later, I'm in my city apartment. I take the micro-cassette player and I play it and record myself with the Canon camera, a little tiny video of me smoking pot while that song is playing. I'll send it to you. It's the funniest clip in the world. And the next day, I wrote to Les Paul's lead guitar player, Frank Vignola, and said, Frank, I just wrote either the world's greatest song or the world's worst song. And I don't mean to insult you because you're a world-class guitar player, but I'd love to know what you think of this. And he called me right back. He said, Jackie, that's the funniest thing I've ever heard. We should record it. So we start recording it, and as we're recording it, the guys say, Jackie, I can't believe how much fun this is. Have you got any other songs? And I'm like, well, I haven't written any songs in 30 or 40 years, but I got the great songs I wrote in the 70s. And so we just made a record out of my old songs and then put it together. And it's a fun CD, right? It's not meant to be taken too seriously, but it's fun stuff.
Well, when you lead off with I'm smoking pot, I got my dick out and thinking of you, okay? And then you have a song about all the stops along the Long Island Railroad, okay, and playing with the Mineola, I'm filling.
Bill Neck, Locust Valley, Glen Cove, Glen Street, Seacliff, Glen Head, Greenville, Roslyn, Alberton, East Williston, and Mineola. Changed it to Jamaica for the city's so nice they named it twice.
But you also have a couple serious songs on there, like one or two.
Well, hell yeah. I have a heart that's made to be broken,
Well,
so what can I tell you? And people are surprisingly shocked by the album, and it's fun,
What?
So I'm really glad you liked it. That makes me happy.
No, and we laughed a real lot, and people were watching us on the New Jersey Turnpike laughing and smoking, okay, and wondering why.
They're laughing everywhere.
And I loved that you were good friends with Les Paul, but we're going to talk about that next time I see you, okay? Because
all right, I mean, he was a guy. They just had
but these guys all want to say thank you for this, Jack.
For him, and it was fantastic.
I love that. I want to hear that story again, okay? Because you got a chapter in your book about Les Paul, one of the nicest guys that I ever met in that business, okay?
Oh, he's so great. And the night I met him, we were with me and him and Keith Richards, and it just couldn't have been more exciting,
And that's a great reason to buy the book. It's called Bow to Stern, correct?
Yep, The Jokeman, Bow to Stern. And it's in Amazon and it's Barnes & Noble, and get one, I tell people, buy one, read it, and then give it to somebody as a present. It's that easy,
That's fantastic. Jackie the Jokeman Martling, thank you so much for spending this time with us. We love you. Radio legend, comedy legend, legend all around.
All right, last
fantastic.
thing I want to say is I tweet jokes every day at 4:20 p.m., so if you like dirty jokes, follow me on Twitter, at Jackie Martling. I'll go away now. Win, I love you, buddy.
Thank you so much, Jack, and 420
you
again.
Give me one. You got to give me one obscure punchline.
For a nickel, I will.
No.
Hey, lady, you think you could pass that test? You know that joke?
No.
The little old lady goes in the butcher shop and she lifts up a chicken's wing and sniffs it and lifts up another wing and sniffs it and lifts up a chicken's leg and sniffs it. And the butcher says, hey, lady, you think you can pass that? All right, guys, I'll let you go. Good night.
Okay, thank you so much, Jackie.